When night falls and sound withdraws, the archive remains. The night is long, the air is still. Only what must continue, continues. A ceramic vessel holds its shape until it does not. The clay was formed, fired, cooled, a process that drove out water, fused the particles, fixed the structure into something harder than what it was before the heat. The firing changed it permanently. What came out of the kiln was not the clay that went in. It was a material that could not be returned to clay by any ordinary means. A material whose structure had been set by the heat into a new arrangement. More rigid, more brittle, more capable of holding its form against the pressure of ordinary use. Brittle means capable of fracturing without first deforming. Metal bends before it breaks, it warns. The deformation is visible, the material yielding first in ways that can be seen and responded to. Ceramic does not bend. It holds its form completely until the stress exceeds what the structure can sustain. And then it does not yield. It divides. The fracture is sudden. The fracture propagates at a speed close to the speed of sound in the material. What was whole is, in a fraction of a second, no longer whole. The vessel was here. The vessel is here in pieces. Between those two states, an instant. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. Consider the fracture surface. Where the vessel divided, two new surfaces were created simultaneously. The surface of one fragment and the surface of the other. Mirror images of each other, the negative and positive of the same event. Before the fracture, these surfaces did not exist. They were interior to the material, hidden inside the ceramic body, inaccessible. The fracture made them visible by separating them. The fracture surface is not smooth. A crack does not travel in a straight line through ceramic. It follows the path of least resistance. Through the weakest bonds, around the hardest inclusions, along the boundaries between crystalline grains where the material is less continuous. The path is complex. It branches and reconnects. It changes direction at microscopic scale in response to the local structure of the material. The result is a surface whose texture is a record of the material's own internal geography. The map of where the ceramic was weakest, where the bonds were fewest, where the structure was least continuous. The fracture surface is a cross-section of the vessel's interior. It shows what was inside, not as image. There is no picture in the fractured surface, but a structure, the grain boundaries, the pore distribution, the mineral inclusions, the record of how the clay particles were oriented when the vessel was formed and fired. Everything that was hidden inside the ceramic is now exposed along the fracture line. The breaking made legible what the forming concealed. The interior of the vessel was always this, the clay body, with its particular composition, its particular porosity, its particular grain structure. This existed from the moment the firing was complete. It existed while the vessel was whole, while nothing had accessed it, while it performed the function of a vessel without ever being examined at its cross-section. The fracture did not create this interior. It revealed it. What the break exposed was already there, waiting behind the surface, present as the substance of the material that the surface enclosed. The fracture is a kind of opening. not the opening the vessel was designed for. That is the mouth, the intended threshold between inside and outside. This opening is unintended, perpendicular to the vessel's axis, cutting through the wall rather than entering through the top. It is an opening that the vessel did not have before and cannot close again. The ceramic that was continuous is now divided, and division in a brittle material does not heal. The two surfaces will not rejoin by themselves. They will remain surfaces, present, exposed, the interior of the material available to the air that now reaches them, until something enters the gap. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density. The fragments fit together, not perfectly. The fracture created some small losses, particles that detached and dispersed, edges that were damaged by the impact, but substantially, the two surfaces that were created simultaneously by the same fracture event are complementary. The protrusion on one matches the recession on the other. The texture on one mirrors the texture on the other. The path the crack took is recorded identically on both sides of the divide. Place the fragments together and the fracture closes. Not entirely. There is a gap, the space where the lost material was, where the edges meet without touching, where the two surfaces approach each other but do not reach each other. The gap follows the path of the fracture exactly. Its width varies, narrower where the surfaces are most complementary, wider where material was lost. The gap is the shape of the loss. The gap is also the shape of what can enter it. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density, a material that can flow into this space, that can follow the path of the fracture, fill the variation in width, penetrate the texture of the fracture surfaces, and adhere to them, will take on the exact geometry of the loss, not because the filling material was shaped to fit, because the space itself determines the shape of whatever fills it. The gap is a mold. What enters it is cast by the loss. Urushi, the resin of a tree, processed, applied in layers, hardened by humidity rather than heat, is capable of this. It flows. It follows the gap's geometry. It adheres to the ceramic surfaces it contacts. It hardens slowly, over days, in the humid conditions that its chemistry requires. When it has hardened, it is not a patch on top of the fracture. It is inside the fracture, filling the gap from within, bonded to both surfaces simultaneously, holding them in relation to each other. The fracture is now filled. The vessel holds again. What holds it is not the ceramic. The ceramic fractured, and the fracture remains. The surface is still present on both sides of the resin. What holds it is the material that entered the gap and hardened there. Fine gold powder suspended in the final layer of resin. The gold does not change the mechanical function of the repair. The resin alone is sufficient to bond the fragments, to fill the gap, to restore the vessel's capacity to hold. The gold changes what the repair looks like. It makes the resin visible in a particular way, highly reflective, catching light that would otherwise pass over the surface without distinction. What becomes visible is the path of the fracture. The gold follows the gap because the gold is in the resin, and the resin follows the gap. Where the crack ran, gold now runs. Where the fracture turned, the gold line turns with it. The width of the gold line corresponds to the width of the gap at each point, wider where material was lost, narrower where the surfaces were nearly continuous. The gold is not drawn onto the surface. It is the gap, filled with material that reflects light. To see the gold line is to see the fracture, not the fracture as it was, open, a gap in the material, an absence, but the fracture as a presence, as a filled thing, as the form that the crack left behind, now occupied by something that can be seen. The gold does not cover the fracture, it inhabits it. The shape of the line is the shape of the breaking, preserved exactly, legible from across the room. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. The vessel before the fracture held one kind of record: the clay, the forming, the firing. These were present in the material as its current condition. The composition of the clay body, the minerals, the particle sizes, the way the particles were oriented by the forming process, the evidence of the firing, the degree of vitrification, the color changes caused by the kiln's atmosphere, the small imperfections that accumulated through the hours at temperature. All of this was present in the vessel, readable by the right instruments, present as the physical consequence of how the vessel was made. The fracture added to this record. The fracture surfaces record the stress that caused them, its direction, its magnitude relative to the material strength, the path it took through the ceramic body. These surfaces now exist inside the vessel, embedded in the resin layer, no longer open to examination but still present, their texture still intact, their information still held in the geometry of the interface between ceramic and fill. The repair added another record: the thickness of the resin layer at each point, a record of the gap width, which is a record of material loss, which is a record of the fracture event's local severity, the adhesion of the resin to the ceramic, a record of the surface chemistry of the fracture faces, of what the interior of the ceramic was composed of, the gold at the surface, a record of the repair itself, of the decision to fill rather than conceal, to make visible rather than hide. 3 records layered in the same object: the making, the breaking, the filling, each one present simultaneously, each one legible to those who know how to read the material. The vessel that holds these 3 records is not the same vessel that held only the first. It is more complex. It has more history. It contains more events compressed into its current condition. The fracture did not diminish the vessel's record. The fracture extended it. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density. There is a quality to the gold line in low light. In strong light, it is bright. The gold reflects the light source directly, a line of high intensity against the matte ceramic surface around it. In low light, it holds what light there is with more fidelity than the ceramic does. The ceramic scatters, the gold gathers. As the light reduces, the gold line remains visible longer than the surface around it, a faint luminosity marking the path of the fracture against a surface that has begun to merge with the dark. The record is most legible when the light is leaving. Not because the gold changes, because the ceramic surface, which in full light provides contrast for the gold, becomes less distinct as the light decreases, and the gold's reflectivity, its tendency to return what light there is rather than scatter it, becomes the dominant property of the surface. What was one line among many visible features becomes, in the dimming, the most present thing. The fracture, which in daylight is visible as a feature of the surface, becomes in low light the structure of the surface, the thing by which the surface is known, the line that persists when other details have withdrawn. Place a hand on the vessel. The ceramic surface is smooth where it was not fractured, the same smooth it has been since the firing, unchanged by the breaking, because the breaking did not reach this portion of the surface. Near the gold line, the surface is different. The resin that filled the gap sits slightly above or slightly below the ceramic surface on either side. The two surfaces, when joined by the fill, are not perfectly flush. The difference is small. The fingers can find it. This is also information. The height of the resin relative to the ceramic on either side records the gap width and the shrinkage of the resin as it hardened. Where the gap was wide, the resin surface may be slightly depressed. The resin shrank as it cured and drew inward, leaving a shallow channel. Where the gap was narrow, the resin surface is nearly flush, the shrinkage too small to produce a detectable step. The fracture line is legible to touch in the dark when the gold is not visible, when the eye cannot find the repair. The fingers follow the path of the breaking along the vessel's surface, tracing the route that the crack took through the ceramic, reading the history of an instant that lasted less than a second and is recorded permanently as the material. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density. Consider the gold line against what surrounds it. The ceramic surface on either side of the line is uniform. The same material throughout, the same color, the same texture, the same response to light. It does not record the fracture. The ceramic that did not crack is unchanged by the cracking that happened nearby. The fracture passed through the ceramic body, and the ceramic on either side of its path is the same ceramic it was before, unaltered, holding no evidence of what the fracture did to its neighbor. Only the line holds the record. This is the gold line's precise function, not to decorate a surface that would otherwise be plain, but to mark the location of an event that left no trace on the surfaces immediately beside it. The fracture occurred here. The ceramic on both sides does not show it. The line shows it because the line is inside it, because the line is made of the fill that the gap required, because the gap was the fracture's only physical legacy, and the gold is the gap made visible. The vessel announces its history, not loudly, not as declaration, as a line running across the surface, following the path that the physics of brittle fracture chose when the stress exceeded the threshold. The line does not say, "This broke." It shows where the breaking was. The difference between saying and showing is the difference between a label and a record. The gold line is a record. It holds the shape of the event in the shape of the material that filled it. Without the gold, the vessel would show a repair but not its path. The filled gap would be present, the resin, slightly different in texture from the surrounding ceramic, detectable to close attention. But the precise route of the fracture, the exact path the crack traveled, the record of how the breaking moved through the ceramic body, this would be present but not legible. The gold makes it legible. It renders in visible form the information that the fracture inscribed in the gap's geometry. The vessel rests in this room, in the still air, holding whatever it holds or holding nothing. Its function as a vessel is separate from its record as an object. It can hold things again. The repair is strong. The resin bonded to the ceramic, and the ceramic held the bond, and the vessel is again capable of the use it was made for. The fracture did not end its use. It interrupted it, and the interruption was filled, and the use resumed, now in a vessel that carries the record of the interruption inside it. What was broken is held together by what entered the break. This is the physical fact, stated plainly. The ceramic fractured, and the gap that resulted was filled with a material that hardened and bonded to both sides, and the vessel is now one thing again, not by any restoration of the original. The original ceramic is still fractured. The surfaces are still present on either side of the fill. The break is still there inside the repair. One thing, not by the removal of the break, but by the addition of something that spans it. The spanning material is visible. The break it spans is visible through the spanning material. Both are present. Neither conceals the other. Outside, the night continues. The air is still. The gold line on the vessel's surface holds the last available light without giving it back, gathering, not scattering, the faint remainder of the room's illumination into the path that the fracture left. The making is in the ceramic. The breaking is in the line. The filling is what the line is made of. All three are the vessel now. All three rest here together, in the dark, in the silence between one thing and whatever comes next. The vessel does not know it carries this history. There is no knowing in ceramic, no awareness of the record compressed into its current condition. What the vessel is tonight is simply the result of everything that happened to it. The forming and the firing, the fracture and the fill, each event present as the physical consequence it produced, all of them layered into the object that sits here in the stillness. The gold holds the last of the light. The ceramic holds the memory of the fire that made it. The resin holds the space where the breaking was. Each holds differently. Each holds what it can. Together, they are the vessel, which holds all of it and holds it still. When night falls, the archive remains.